will be providing an update on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan, as he has been doing regularly. I would also like to introduce everyone that's present in front of us here, supporting the Minister this morning. To the Minister's left, we've got Mr. Eric Shunmagam from Eskom's Generation Unit. We also have Ms. Daphne Mukwena, also from Eskom, and we are also joined by Mr. Silas Zimu, the Minister's Special Advisor. I would like to also advise that once the Minister has given us the update, we will open the floor for questions from members of the media. We will start with the members of the media that are present here, and we would like to also welcome members of the media who are following the briefing virtually to participate by sharing their questions on the GCIS WhatsApp group, which is the GCIS Media Updates WhatsApp group. I would like to now invite the Minister to commence with the media briefing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tsakani, and good morning to colleagues, members of the media, and everyone who's joining us back at home. And just to thank members of the media for making time to carry this update so that we get to inform the country. We are an important transmitter of this very significant message to the South African population, to industry, and all the major stakeholders in the country, just to get an appreciation of the progress that we are making in relation to the execution and prosecution of the Energy Action Plan, which was launched and unveiled by the President in July of 2022, which is meant to address the single biggest challenge that is facing a post-apartheid government, a challenge of existential proportions in both economic and social terms, which is load shedding. The last time when we had a briefing, I did indicate that in our calculation and summation is that we have turned the corner, although we're not out of the woods yet, but I think that we are beginning to show sustained improved performance over an extended period of time. And this is good news in that it's an affirmation and validation of the work that the team is doing at Eskom. Exceptional amount of work and application that is being done by the Eskom, led by the chair, Mr. Makwana, the outgoing chair, and the collective of the board of Eskom, the acting CEO, Mr. Khalib Kasim, but most importantly, the people who are at the coalface of the delivery of this exceptional performance, led by none other than Mr. Beki Nxumalo. I think this is something that has to be commended, and I really want to convey our appreciation at the team across generation, and those that are the station managers, the men and women who are committed, patriotic, competent, and selfless. Their single interest is to ensure that we are able to improve the performance of this installed unit. So the point I'm making is that these plans that have been put into motions are beginning to bear fruit. I did indicate some time back when we were experiencing heightened levels of load shedding stage 6 that essentially what we are dealing with is short-term pain, which is going to result in long-term gain. And we are beginning to see the kinds of gains that I was referring to. I did make the point initially that our actions are deliberate. So we are going to invest a lot of our efforts to ensure that we are able to maintain the units, and thanks in part to the fiscal support that we received from National Treasury. The 254 billion rand of fiscal relief has been placed to good use, and the generation team at Eskom has received a significant part of that allocation, and that's why we are investing in these units. We have also gone to ensure that we place men and women with a considerable amount of experience to be responsible for the management and the leadership at the station level, especially those stations that are likely going to give us the best rewards going forward if we were to do things right. I'm referring to stations such as Tutuka, where we took one of the most experienced people in Eskom on the generation side, Mr. Bruce Moyer, built a team around him, and we can see that there's exceptional improvement. And again, bolstered the team at Kusile. You know that there's been a number of units that have been out as a result of the challenges associated with the flue gas desulfurization unit. Of course, even there, we have placed an exceptionally talented team, both on the project side, but also at the management of Kusile. And then you are beginning to see that the return of the units is much earlier than promised. It's a function of engineering, re-engineering, just looking at if you like, the implementation timetable, ensuring that activities that can be done parallel are not sequenced. Essentially, they are not done one after the other, but essentially are done parallel. And we are beginning to see the fruits. The return of Kusile Unit 3, the return of Kusile Unit 1 ahead of schedule. It's a testament to the amount of effort that this team is making. And then we also are going to be going into areas of a new generation. I think it's important that we shouldn't be complacent, and we have never been complacent during this period, even when we're beginning to see significant amount of green shoots. I think what that does is just to bolster and raise, if you like, the morale of the team to ensure that we even achieve greater results and we are able to save the South African economy. So kudos to the team at Eskom. I want to repeat the generation team, Mr. Bheki Nxumalo, Eric, and the team that are doing exceptional work. They must continue to do that exceptional work. We have introduced these interventions when we came into office after the president appointed, sat with the team and thought that the best way of getting out of this difficult situation is to ensure that we make these investments in these units. And what are the results when the units come back? They remain on load for the longest period of hours. They are also the amount of megawatts they are giving us. They approximate, if you like, their design capacity. So essentially, we have undermined the rate and frequency of failure of these units, their reliability, that is. And secondly, we have improved on their efficiency. They are beginning to produce more and more closer to their design capacity. So this is not an act of accident. It's not some intervention that comes from a place that is unknown. It's simple engineering at work, and we really want to commend the team. We can see it in the numbers. What do the numbers tell us? So outside the fact that our lights are on for most of the hours of the day, we have seen that we have come out of a period of sustained no load shedding. That's significant at multiple levels. Significant is psychological in that we are beginning to illustrate that it's possible for us to come out of load shedding. Since we came into office, we have not had a sustained period of load shedding. And I make the point that for us to get to a period where we have 365 days of no load shedding, it starts with 1 day of no load shedding. It goes to 2, it goes to a month, 3 months, 6 months, and ultimately 12 months. And it is those small steps that we are taking. These are gradual steps, incremental steps, and we are beginning to see that we are getting closer to where we want to be. And I'll illustrate that outside just the Eskom generating units, the installed capacity, there's additional work that we are doing to ensure that there's a sustained generation, and we don't just rely on the fleet of Eskom power stations. So it's important that we are able to tap into the work that is done by the private sector as a result of the reforms that have been introduced on the generation side. So we're beginning to see significant amount of uptake, and we're getting to see that these megawatts now are finding their way into the system. So what has been the trend line? Remember that when I do this trend line, I juxtapose it with what was the performance at the period of May. We're using May as a baseline so that we're able to compute a longitudinal assessment over an extended period of time. What does the trend line say? Of course, there's going to be momentary momentary periods of dips, and then there's going to be ups. We're averaging it, and that's what we are searching for. That's what is important, is a trend line, is that gradient. It has to be positive, and once that gradient is positive, it means that we are onto something exceptionally great. So we know that a baseline at May, on the average capacity available, we're sitting at about 27,410 megawatts. And just to say that the average between the week of the 2nd to the 6th of October, we're already sitting at 28,268 megawatts. So if you compare it to what was the period during the baseline, you can see that we have added an additional 800 megawatts. The average, the week, the 9th to the 13th, we still upped that to 2,962 megawatts from the previous week of the 2nd to the 6th of October. So essentially added, if you like, another 700 megawatts. So what is the point I'm making? You can see that there's a gradual sustained improvement in relation to available capacity. And then the week that was, remember that I'm measuring really the weekdays from the 16th to the 20th, that number has gone up. We are sitting at the average of 29,418 megawatts. And in fact, the Thursday and Friday, we're beginning to breach 30,000 megawatts. That's exceptional. It's a psychological barrier. So this is a game of numbers, and the game of numbers translates itself in the number of hours the lights are on. So we're beginning to breach 30,000 megawatts, and we want to do that on a consistent basis. So you can see that we are making significant improvements. So consistently now, we are about 60-61% of available capacity. And where are these gains being registered? So the first one is that if you look at the UCLF, a combination of UCLF and unplanned capacity loss factor, that is the rate at which these units are failing, and the partial load losses, the inefficiency of these units, even though they are on load, they are not approximating their design capacity. So that's the losses that we are experiencing even when the units are on load. And the outage slips, our inability to return the units at the time that we promised the South African population to return those units. When you aggregate those, it tells you the amount of megawatts that are out of the system, which are undermining our ability to resolve load shedding. So what is the situation? Is that the baseline of May, we're at 17,369 megawatts. So in May, the average 17,369 megawatts of generation capacity were out of the system. So we're not benefiting from that, and that's why you had seen intensified levels of load shedding. And as a result of the cumulative effects of the work that Becky, Mr. Nxumalo has been doing, Eric and the team, the various teams at the various power stations, we have experienced that there has been a gradual reduction of the units that are out of load, and essentially we are bringing the megawatts into the system, and therefore the available capacity is going up. So the week of the 2nd to the 6th of October, we brought that number to 14,113 megawatts. So if you compare it with the 17,300, so it essentially means that there's an additional 3,000 megawatts that is placed on the grid. And then you go to the week of the 9th to the 13th, that number even reduced further. It went to 13,373 megawatts. What does that mean compared to May? 14,000 additional megawatts has been made available, an improvement of about 800 megawatts from the previous week. And this is the trend line. So remember that our focus is on the trend line. We do accept that these are engineering units who are going to have surprises, there are going to be dips, but what we are looking at is that trend line. And then the week that we just came from, we experienced in what is about 13,096 megawatts. Significant compared to the May baseline, it's about 14,300 megawatts. This is significant, and this is the point I'm making. It's as a result of the work that the men and women, exceptionally competent and talented men of Eskom at the various power stations, are doing tremendous amount of work to address this situation. And that's why we are seeing the kind of results that we are seeing. Put this into context again. When Eskom did its summer outlook, they make the point that they are anticipating that your UCLF will be at about 14,500 megawatts. Against that number, we are 1,500 megawatts better. So that's an exceptional improvement that the team is doing. And that's why we are beginning to see the kind of results that we are doing. But we don't let that go into waste. What do I mean? We are continuing to sustain high levels of plant maintenance. So you can see that we have not relented on the plant maintenance. So the gains that we are making on the available capacity improving, we take some of those opportunity maintenance, plant maintenance, philosophy maintenance. We are fixing these units so that when we get to difficult periods, these units continue to perform, and we don't necessarily exclusively or rely heavily on the open cycle gas turbine, which are really meant to give us, if you like, address when there's a peaking that far exceeds, if you like, the generation, then we deploy them. So this is exceptional improvement. And in fact, indications are that going into the future, we are going to see this kind of improvement that we have been experiencing. But of course, there are dents. There are areas that requires attention. And the biggest area that requires attention is on our partial load losses. You can see that compared to May, we have not made any significant improvement. And that's why Mr. Ngumalo, Eric, and the team, they are looking at the internal expertise and outside expertise to come and help us, especially at those power stations that are notorious during summer periods to lose a lot of this megawatt as a result of ambient temperature. And in this instance, I'm referring to Matimba, and then there are those units that we have to address the issues of the emissions levels, like Kendall and Kriel. The team is hard at work, and I'm confident that we will go over a period of time, we'll bring this down. As we bring the partial load losses down, it means that we're able to deposit additional megawatts on available generating capacity, and we're able to sustain the South African economy. And then the issues of outage slips, like I said, the best we have had was about 766 megawatts. Of course, we have been averaging, the last week was 1,409 again. It's an area that requires attention. So the outage slips and the partial load losses, those are areas that requires attention. We get those right, we're going to improve, if you like, available generation. And of course, there are issues that are still being attended to. The situation at Quebec, we're sitting with the team. At the right time, we'll come back to you on the situation at Quebec. We did Eskom release a media statement. We're still sitting, they're still sitting with me, the team at Generation, and then we'll come and give you more thoroughgoing answers on Quebec. But for today, we'll put that aside until that briefing comes from the team, and then we're able to own up and come back to you and share with you the kind of work that we are doing. And then, like I said, what I've been sharing with you is the performance of this installed capacity. So the degree to which we are able to sweat the asset. It's a sunk cost. We're investing our resources there. We're ensuring that it's able to give us the most number of megawatts, and we're able to save the South African economy. But that won't be sufficient. It's important that we are able to get into an area where we make it possible for new generation to come back on stream. We know that the work that has been done by Eskom and the chaps who are on the wind side of generation, they've done a study. That study suggests that there's significant uptake. There's an insatiable appetite by the private sector to invest in new generation capacity. And their computation suggests that there's about 66 gigawatts of projects that are at various stages of the project life cycle. And we know that our ability to exploit this new generation capacity is a function of grid capacity. And that's why I did indicate the last time we are working on the transmission. We did share with you the kind of work that we are doing. We'll keep on giving you updates because it's important. It's a critical part of the work that we are doing. It's undermining our ability to onboard new generation capacity, especially from the renewables. It's undermining our decarbonization agenda. It's undermining the ability of industry to transition to sources of cleaner energy so that they are able to continue their market entry into major industrialized countries. We do anticipate that the carbon border adjustment mechanism is coming into place, is going to undermine the ability of South African industry to export into those markets, because part of that condition as a result of CBAM is to those countries are looking at how these products that land in their market were produced. If they were produced using dirtier forms of energy, there's either going to be tariff, and therefore our goods and products will be uncompetitive, or they'll be denied access. So it's something that requires our attention. But what do we know now is that 1,338 megawatts is expected to connect to the grid in 2023. So now, as we go towards the end of the year, 1,338 megawatts of new generating capacity really outside, if you like, the stable of Eskom. So it's important because we're beginning to diversify this mix of energy generation, and we're beginning to remain or achieve, if you like, the totality of the mix as advocated for in the IRP 2019. And we do anticipate that by 2024 we'll add about 3,081 megawatts. So this is important. And then on one of the projects in the renewable power emergent mitigation independent power program is going to get to, if you like, what we call legal close by October of this year. So they are going to get to the legal close, and then we expect that a number of projects are going to get to financial close. Our projection is that 2 are on course to get to financial close by December of 2023. And of course, once you get to financial close, then you start the construction, and this project will cumulatively give an additional 424 megawatts. And of course, once we get the timelines on the execution, the implementation of these projects, then we'll get to know when are we to expect these 424 megawatts to come on stream. So it's important, just a reaffirmation of the programs that government has embarked on, that they are coming into fruition. And it's an aggregation of this that is going to help us to ensure that we build a significant amount of energy sovereignty in the country. And then we know that there's about 3 more projects from bid window number 5 that are on track to reach a commercial close by end of November 2023, and this should give us 300 megawatts. Of course, we get to financial close, and then we get into the construction phase is another 8 to 12, 18 months of construction. But it's significant, just announcing the fact that these projects are progressing along the project life cycle. I think for us that's important, and of course we would have wanted this to happen much, much quicker, but of course it is what it is. We are going to make it possible for us, working with the project sponsors, to ensure that we accelerate their implementation. And then I'm happy to say that the program of roof solar capacity in South Africa has more than doubled since July of 2022 to over 4,500 megawatts. And I really have to make this point. It's important to say that generation from rooftop, it's a significant feature of how we see, if you like, the energy landscape in the country. Because most of the time I get to field questions, so yeah, but demand is going down because of rooftop solar that is rolled out by both industry and household. Yes, that's what we want. That's what we are encouraging. That's why the state has come with an incentive by Minister of Finance to say that we are going to incentivize the rollout of PV. And in fact, we are advocating for, as a department, that we need to have that incentive to be extended to components of that self-generation mix that carries the heaviest capital capital costs. So I'm talking about battery, I'm talking about inverters. That it shouldn't just be restricted to PV, but it should be also extend to battery and inverters. And we think that once we do that, there's going to be considerable offtake. The second point that we're advocating for is the introduction of an instrument, that financing instrument, that will make it possible that even poor households are able to tap into this renewable resource. Because as it is now, it is those that have got are sitting on unencumbered cash, they've got the right liquidity position, they've got the right risk profile to raise money from the banks. It excludes those who don't have those three, and essentially those who have that benefit is middle to high income earners. So essentially the design, the unintended consequences of this incentive is that it introduces some degree of asymmetry, inequality. The poor can access these new resources because they don't have the capital resources that are required, and we want to equalize that, and that's why we are going into that area. So we really want to see this number even going higher and higher. And of course, once we introduce mechanisms such as feed-in tariffs, we think that it's an additional incentive for people to roll out the PV solar. What feed-in tariff really says is that for that excess generating capacity, as a result of you having installed a PV, combination of PV, battery, and inverters, that excess generation, you are able to feed it back into the grid for a fee. So essentially, it's a revenue earner. You transition from a net consumer to a net generator. It means that your return on investment on your capital is much more truncated. You are relief of, if you like, the utility cost, if you like, that you have to pay to municipalities because you are self-generating. So those are some of the work that we are doing to address this situation. Eskom has succeeded now and approved about 1,136 megawatts of standard offer program, which exceeds our target of 1,000 megawatts. So that's a significant achievement. So we're trying to illustrate that there's no over-reliance on the performance of this fleet of Eskom. We are going to sweat it. It's a sunk cost. It's an asset to the country. But as we go into the future, it's important that we look at new sources of generation. And then this makes it possible for us to relieve Eskom from super exploiting the open cycle gas turbine, burning the diesel, because now we're going to have, when this comes on stream, an additional 1,136. It means that Eskom is financially better off. We can redeploy those sources somewhere as opposed to just burning diesel, can go into transmission, can go back to generation, can go into distribution, modernizing the, if you like, the infrastructure, and ensuring that Eskom continues to be a going concern. So it's important that we look at this in its totality, and the program on standard offer is well on its way. And as I conclude, I must say that we've done tremendous amount of work on the issues around the wheeling framework. So the wheeling framework simply means there's a generator somewhere, someone who say invested his or her own money to generate electricity using renewable sources, and then enters into a private arrangement with an off-taker. It can be industry, and say, I'm going to sell you this electricity. I'm going to produce so many megawatts, and then they enter into a power purchase agreement. The developer then rolls out the project, and then the off-taker is able to benefit. But for the electricity to move from that part to where the off-taker is, it must use the infrastructure of Eskom and the infrastructure of municipalities. Come to think of it as a highway. It's going to convey the electrons from the producer and then to the off-taker. There's a fee you must pay for using the freeways. So we want to standardize that. That's what we call wheeling. When I say wheeling, I'm talking, think of when you are driving on a national road. You're paying a fee when you pay a toll gate for purposes of using the road. Someone is invested in improving the road, the capacity, the riding quality, and all of that. There's a fee that must be paid for that. So there's that fee that you need to pay, because municipalities have rolled out the reticulation infrastructure. Eskom has rolled out the transmission infrastructure. They spend money on that. You are benefiting on that asset, so you need to pay, if you like, an onboarding fee for you to use that infrastructure. That's willing, and I really have to say that it sets out the principles of non-discriminatory rights of access to wheel electricity and the charges to be raised. So it's important that we are able to introduce certainty, and in this way we are able to broaden the scope of new generating capacity. The last time we joined Eskom, hosted a seminar where we're trying to show what virtual wheeling can do, the combination of Eskom and Vodacom on virtual wheeling, and we can see the results are beginning to bear fruit. Once we are able to cement that, able to confirm what those benefits are, we'll expand it to the entire market. Like I said, we also are at the draft stages of the net billing framework, and we are awaiting NESA approval. The net billing framework is different from the wheeling and the feed-in tariff in that here you are not transacting with money. What you are transacting with is the offsetting of the megawatts. To say that during this period, the time of use, I've used so much self-generated, and then over that period you have charged me so much, and then we are balancing off what I've self-generated and what you claim I've drawn from the grid. You balance that one out, and that's the net billing framework really that we are referring to. So what is the point I'm making as I conclude is that we have turned the corner. We have turned the corner. The available generation is going up. Consistent performance, like I said, 29,000 megawatts. We are beginning to breach on a consistent basis 30,000 megawatts. Of course, unit number 2 at Kusile is still going to come. As I've indicated, it's going to come end of November. Unit number 5 at Kusile is going to come. As we have previously indicated, it will come in December. So that number of the unplanned capacity loss factor will come down, because as these units come down, Unit 2 is accounted for in that 13,000 megawatts that I just shared with you. We continue to bring this down. And I'm saying to the country that the idea of going below 12,000 megawatts on a consistent base, 12,000 megawatts of unplanned capacity loss factor is real. We're going to get to that stage. The possibility of us getting to consistently at 32,000 megawatts is possible just on the fleet before I add these other things, the work that we are doing on the wheeling, the work that we are doing on the standard offer program. So that's the point I was making. We have turned the corner. We are not yet there. When we are there, we'll let you know that we are there. And you don't have to get any confirmation from me because the lights will be on 24 hours of the day, consecutive days going into the future. We should be able to lift the South African economy out of its doldrums, ensure that we keep people out of into employment, protect the existing jobs, ensure that indeed we are able to improve the quality of life, and simultaneously we are able to ensure universal access. Thanks, Taka.
Thank you very much, Minister Ramokgopa, for detailing the turning of the corner on generation performance and the overall very progressive implementation of the Energy Action Plan. We will now commence with the question and answer session. We open the floor, starting with the members of the media who are in the room. By a show of hands, we can take questions. Are there any questions in the room? Ishmael, do we have any questions online?
Yes, Chairperson. The first set of questions, they are from Hemlo Prius, Independent Media. Minister, when does Eskom expect the weekly EAF to exceed 60%? When will Eskom change its unplanned outage assumption from 16,000 megawatt to something closer to 14,000 megawatt or 13,000 megawatt? And last question from Emilio, are we using less OCGTs now? The next questions are from William Hall, Network 24. In the event that Quebec does not complete the required work in time for the renewal of its license, what impact will losing Unit 1 and 2 together have on the trajectory of turning the corner on load shedding? Minister, given the notable improvement in performance at coal power stations, does the Minister believe that the notorious unreliability of these stations have been sufficiently addressed to be able to rely on the low performance levels going forward? Chris Garrett, EP Business Intelligence, please can the Minister confirm whether or not the outgoing Eskom chairman has provided the Minister of Electricity with the feedback report that he asked for following the Minister's visit to Kuwait to find out what was going on? We have Terence Creamer, Engineering News. When will Eskom release the updated generation connection capacity assessment? And will that be the last hurdle to overcome for the next renewables bid window to be launched? Has Cabinet deliberated on the BGP's report on the conflict, and will the Finance Minister provide any feedback during the medium-term budget policy statement next week? We have Lamis Somaji, News 24. Which project from the RMI 4P will reach legal close by October? Are the projects that will reach financial close later this year referring to G7 and EDF renewables? We have Chris Garrett, EE Business Intelligence. Is the Minister expecting legal and financial close for the 1,200 megawatt from the KR Powership in the risk mitigation IPP procurement program anytime soon? Can I continue?
Yeah, I think you can continue.
Okay.
Thank you, Ishmael.
Follow-up from Hemlo Prius, Independent Media. How will Statistics South Africa capture electricity consumption if it cannot track the rooftop solar PV consumption? We have William Horn, NEAR 24. What is the state of the program announced in 2022, where Eskom will release around 30,000 hectares of its land in Mpumalanga to IPPs for accelerated rollout of projects where the grid can connect them? The last question, Lamis Somaji, News 24. Is there an indication of when Eskom expect to start using the megawatt from the standard offer program? That's all for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. We will now get the responses. We'll start with Eric.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. I will try to answer those that I am aware of and can provide facts. I can confirm last week we actually averaged 60% as the average EAF week on week. And if you really look at the last 3 weeks, we've sort of trended from 57 to 58, 59, and 60. So I think it has a direct correlation to the minister's feedback in terms of as soon as we start breaching the 13,000 megawatts, we start to see the higher EAF. This has definitely had a ripple impact on the OCGT usage. I think we've said this from the very beginning, that the OCGT is there to support and as a trade-off against load shedding, but with the improved performance from generation, we are definitely seeing lesser consumption. What I can confirm is that we will be using the OCGTs during morning and evening peak, once again to balance the system. But as we start to bridge the 13,000 and aspire towards the 12,000, clearly we will be sitting in a better space. But definitely if I look at the OCGT consumption for this last month as an example, against the budget, much lesser usage, which is good news, not only for Eskom's bottom line, but for the country. I think in terms of the coal, the issue around addressing the reliability, we've been open and transparent in terms of the recovery program. Within that recovery program, we've highlighted the priority 6 stations We've added an additional 2 to that, so we now focus on the priority 8. I can confirm that when one looks at Duva and one looks at Tutuka, we are seeing remarkable improvement. And then against that backdrop, Kusile, which we will start to see an improved performance towards the latter part of the year. I think what is more important also with Kusile, if we start to embed those 6 major modifications, then we should start seeing it perform the same as Medupi. I need to stress that the Medupi program was not overnight. The Medupi program started in 2018. We've identified 6 major defects. We've addressed those defects. We've worked with the contractor, together with leadership. I think consistently with the stations that we've identified, Duva, Tutuka, when I look at Kusile, it's also against the backdrop of good leaders leading those stations. We now see, for example, Medupi on weeks averaging 90%. So we'd like to get Kusile trending at the same EAF performance. I think the Minister will address the question in terms of the handover report from the outgoing chair. And then in terms of the VGB, what I can confirm is that National Treasury have engaged with us. We're working together with VGB. I think just in terms of a typical audit process, we go through the recommendations. I think as Eskom, have objectively challenged some of the recommendations. We needed objective evidence to back the recommendation. And we are working together with National Treasury to ensure that the report is fair and balanced. Once again, we will take the final report from National Treasury and we will address the actual recommendations. Once again, I think we must highlight it was an independent report. It focused on the technical issues at the stations. I think it was good to note that the issues we've picked up in our recovery plan, some of the issues, for example, on partials, was also picked up in the report. VGB have also, I think, highlighted other cross-cutting issues which we have addressed is in terms of training and development and building up the skills. The other question that I have here, just in terms of the land lease program, I think, once again, it was against the backdrop of how do we help South Africa. There were distinctly 3 phases. I can report on phase 1. We have identified 1,800 megawatts to be linked up, and we've identified that in the Mpumalanga area. And I think once again, that program will continue over the next 18 to 24 months, and then that should actually then connect to the stations and the networks closer to the grid.
Thank you very much, Eric. Maybe just to say the following on the impact of Unit 1 and 2 of Kubek if they are not going to come online. Of course, the impact is obvious. Now it means that, as you know, that Unit 2 is, Unit 1 is the one that is out, so we're losing 980 megawatts. So if they are out simultaneously, it means as is current conditions, situation rather, we're going to use another 980 megawatts. Like I said earlier on, I really don't anticipate that the situation, and as I've said at the onset of the briefing that we're sitting with the team, they're taking me through on what are some of those measures we are putting in place to avoid a situation where you can have a worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario in this instance is that the 2 units are out at the same time, because essentially what it means is that you are losing a combined 1,840 megawatts. So it's something that will receive our attention. And of course, this also goes with the point that Chris raised. Yet I'm yet to receive that feedback, and of course we have made follow-ups. But like I said, now it's beyond just me getting follow-ups. We'll just sit with the team and essentially get an appreciation of what are some of the real conditions that obtains there, what are the issues that requires immediate attention. But the comfort I've been given, even before we have that sitting, is that you are unlikely going to have a situation where both of them are out simultaneously. Of course, it will be catastrophic to subtract from the kind of progress that we are making, but more significantly just undermining the nuclear program in the country. Because remember that we are doing all of these things to extend the life of this nuclear power station. Is going to undermine the energy mix. So it's got serious ramifications just outside the megawatts that is taking out. I think it's something that requires attention, and there's a collective appreciation of that. And of course, the point has been made. I think correctly you do characterize the coal-fired power stations as being notoriously unreliable. So I've said a few things. The first one was that we are doing everything possible to ensure that we restore the reliability of these units. But we can't take away the fact that they are aging. And as they are aging, the kind of performance that you expect is also going to taper down unless you make significant investments in improvement, new technology and the likes. And of course, you need to juxtapose that, the cost of doing that or just relying on new generation capacity. So yes, you can't solely rely on these power stations. The only reason that we're going this route now is because that's the shortest way to ending load shedding or relieving the intensity of load shedding. And that's why I go to great length to explain the kind of work that we are doing on new generation, because I think the future is on new generation capacity, including the work of what Eric was reflecting on, the leased land that Eskom has placed in the hands of private sector close to power stations, and this is largely on the old power stations whose life is coming towards an end. There's existing transmission capacity. We don't think that you have to go through an inordinate licensing requirements with regards to EIAs, because they are already licensed to produce, and in fact you are going cleaner. So we think that it will be quicker for you to onboard, and that's why I think that the focus on transmission and the focus on renewables, especially where land has been leased and placed in private hands, is going to help us to address this situation. But an over-reliance on these units, I think, is particularly unhelpful. It's a height of folly to suggest that going into the future, this is going to resolve our problems. It's just providing that kind of relief, and that's why we must accelerate the generation, the onboarding of new generating capacity. On the VGB, of course, Eric has responded. National Treasury will make that available to us. We are an important stakeholder, because primarily then in government we are the ones who must carry, if you like, the recommendations. Eric makes the point that there's that toing and froing on what the findings are, because I think Eskom does have the right to say we disagree with you on the following, but of course it's an independent report. It will still make its own findings. And I think that part of the reason why National Treasury went ahead is that at the time of commissioning this report, we're not in the picture. Ordinarily, we'll be the ones who are the custodians of a report of this magnitude scope, but that's not the situation. Of course, we do accept work has been done, and I'm sure at the right time it will be made available to us. And on the basis of that, we should be able to work with Eskom, seeing to it that the recommendation that we find appropriate, they get to be implemented. Omaji, on which projects are on the standard offer program, I don't have the actual ones. At the right time, we'll come back to you and I give you the actual project. I just have the aggregation of the megawatts that are available, that 1,300 megawatts. And Chris, on the car power ship, like I said, is a process away from us that is run by the IPP office. I've stated what our views are in relation to the timelines, what the risks are associated with the commodity risk associated with, if you like, the currency risk. If it's a hard currency, then you are exposing the country to those fluctuations. We have expressed what those are, but the IPP office really will address that. Like I said, the last time I reported, and that still is the case, is the issues of the EIA, the licenses associated with that. And then on the issue of whether States SA is able to track consumption, if they can't track the amount of rooftop solutions that have been implemented by a combination of households and and industry. I think it's something that we brought to their attention, raised them with when we're doing, if you like, at cabinet, we're having a conversation around the meaning of what the stats is from a policy point of view, monitoring, evaluation, planning, going into the future. We're making the point that we need to be factoring in these new sources of generation capacity, so that we have a full appreciation of what is available out there. And I think it's a critique that they've accepted, and I'm sure that it will be accounted for going into the future, the next cycles of these reports, but it will be helped immensely by the work that is also being done at Eskom to feed into that process, so that they were able to provide a complete and accurate account of the generation capacity in the country. Thanks.
Thank you very much once again, Minister, for the update and all the responses and the clarity. Thank you to Eric as well. To Lames, we will ensure that we indeed do get back to you with regards to the projects. Thank you very much to all the members of the media who have joined us this morning. This brings us to the end of this week's ministerial briefing on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan by Minister Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think I must release that standard for the statement.